Earlier in the course was pretty cool. We walked through a bunch of stuff. One of the most exciting things I think was interacting with Prisma, which is a really powerful tool, and then even like configuring some of the authentication, which is usually like this mysterious thing unless you've like done it a few times. So I thought that was really cool. Even having done that many times, every time I build authentication, I'm still just like at awe of the simplicity, but also the effectiveness of how that works. It's really cool. And today we're just going to continue on that. We're going to keep going, working on cool things. We're already in the rabbit hole, so let's keep digging. What we're going to do next is we're going to talk about the route handlers. So if you remember, if we go back to our project right now, let me pull it up. Where am I at? There we go. We still don't have the route handlers built out for the routes that we created, right? We have all these routes here for product, update point, but no route handlers. So we got to fill that out, and it's a lot. So we'll be doing that. I just want to go over some tips and different things to think about as we're doing, as we're building out these route handlers, because we know how to query the database a little bit because we did so in the user handlers here. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then we'll also talk about how to deal with user input, because when you're dealing with user input in any application, whether it's front end or back end, it's always going to be dangerous. So let's talk about that. All right, so if you head on over to the site that we've been using, we have this one. We're on 8 route handlers, and we're going to be talking about validating inputs. So basically, TLDR, never trust the user, okay? You ever heard of SQL injection? Okay, that's what happens when you trust the user. Like it's part of building a CRUD application, create, read, update, destroy, is that you want users to be able to create things. You want them to be able to update things. And the only way that they can do that is if you allow them to give you the options on what they want to create and what they want to update. So they have to provide you some type of input. Now that can be dangerous because depending on how you developed your system, typically if you developed it with a lot of assumptions, as in you assumed everything would go right, your app's going to break because it will go wrong. Because it's not like the whole world was over your shoulder watching you build this and they know exactly how your API works, right? Things are going to go wrong. Even if you built the client in which the users interact with and your client understands the rules of your API, it'll probably still go wrong because it's just complicated. So at the end of the day, you can't really trust the user. So just like on the front end, you might do some form validation before a user submits a form. Okay, we do the same thing on the back end for validating the input before we start interacting with the database. Because if you, for instance, let's say you allowed someone to change their username, but you didn't validate whether or not this is the right user. Okay, whose username are they changing? Anybody user? Like if I just have the ID of a user, can I change their username? Like how does that work? So there's just a lot of stuff that goes into it and you can't really trust the user. So we're gonna make sure that we don't by validating our inputs. Now, what HTTP methods are we going to use that allow someone to send something up? So we know get is for getting stuff.
Chat says post.
Post is for creating things. So yeah, a user probably send something up. So we want to do input validation on post requests. What about any other methods in which a user might send something up? A put, exactly, where they update something. So yeah, we want to validate the inputs on all of like the puts and the posts. So that's what we're going to do. So what does that look like? There's a lot of ways. There's many ways to validate inputs. You don't really need a library or a framework or anything like that. Just like I guess technically you don't really need Express, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't use a library or a framework because you end up just building your own system anyway. So I've used a lot of them in the past, and the one that I've landed on was this one called Express Validator. I think it's really cool. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through, find those puts, those posts, and think about the different inputs that we're going to need for those requests, and then we're going to write validators for them. So that way, by the time the controllers actually do their job, they can safely assume that the inputs are correct, and they don't have to do that checking themselves. which is another way. That's probably another way how you would do it. So basically what I'm describing is if I go to router, and let's say for a post request for a product, right? So we have a request, we have a response, right? There's nothing wrong with, coming in here and saying like, oh, if not rec dot body dot name, because I know a product needs a name to be created, do something here. There's nothing wrong with that, but imagine a product needed like, I don't know, 6 fields for it to be created. And then you had all these other routes too. I mean, this just gets tedious. And you haven't even gotten to the part, to the actual job of the handler, which is like to actually create a post down here somewhere. That's all the handler should be concerned with, is creating that post, or I'm sorry, creating this product in that case, and not having to deal with this type of logic, right? You want to separate that out. That way it can be tested, it can be reused, it can be changed in one place. But there's nothing wrong with this. It's just try to separate out different pieces of logic as much as you can. It just scales better, especially if you work on a team with many people. You can have someone working on input validations and someone working on handlers, right? But if you just do it like this, you're gonna run into a lot of problems. So functionally, just fine, but practically, probably not ideal.